So our bosses sent me a challenge here on Vikings Now. They said no way Vikings fans can get 25 new subs on today's video. Let's prove them wrong. The Purple family, the Purple Nation, go down there, hit that subscribe button, help me out, and plus, it's completely free. Welcome to the Vikings Now. I'm your host for today's show, Patrick Seatman. We got a loaded show to talk about with you guys today. Number one, we're going to be talking about the recent Danielle Hunter trade rumors. And then the second story on today's show, T.J. Hockenson. He's expected to get an extension with the Minnesota Vikings. And then number three, the Vikings have been doing a lot of research into this upcoming NFL QB draft class. We're going to be talking about the Vikings possibly drafting a QB. But let's start off with Danielle Hunter, because there's a report that came out that the Vikings could be looking to ship Hunter for some draft compensation, which makes sense because the Vikings only have 5 picks in this year's 2023 NFL draft, and he only has 2 years left on his contract. If you're looking at the Vikings edge situation right now, obviously, Za'Darius Smith is still there, which we'll talk about him in a little bit. But you also did just sign Marcus Davenport in the recent NFL free agency period. And honestly, Danielle Hunter last year, he was solid. I mean, he had 10.5 sacks, 12 tackles for loss, 1 forced fumble. But the 2 years before that, Danielle Hunter, he really struggled due to injuries. He had that torn pectoral that kept him out the entire season. And if you guys do remember, that peak Danielle Hunter season, man, he was fantastic. Danielle Hunter, he was the quickest player in NFL history to get the 50 sacks. And me personally, I've always been a huge fan of Danielle Hunter. He was the first Vikings player that I really kind of got my teeth into, and I really dug into his tape, and I said, that guy's going to be special, and he turned out being incredibly special. But his stats over this past 4 seasons, obviously 2020, he dealt with that torn pectoral muscle. In 2019, though, that was the year, man. He had 14.5 sacks, and obviously not shown right now, but in 2018, he also had 14.5 sacks. And then this past year, 2020, he started off the season incredibly slow, but he still was able to get up to 10.5 sacks. So overall, the idea of kind of trading for Danielle Hunter, I got mixed feelings about this. Yes, the Vikings do only have 5 picks in this year's upcoming draft, and I do think they need to try to either trade back or try to get more because they still have a lot of holes left on this roster that need to be filled. However, I still think Danielle Hunter, I think he's got a ton left in his tank. I still think he has that top 5, top 7 edge in the league talent to him. It's just if he can stay healthy, he is getting up there in age, and he does want a new contract, so I kind of see it from both sides. But I want to know what you guys have to say on this. Would you trade Danielle Hunter? Let's just say if team offers you a 2nd, 3rd-round pick, I doubt you could get a 1st. Give me a T for trade or give me a P for pass. This will be the pinned comment on today's video. So YouTube's going to throw an ad break your way. Let it play. Go down there and answer today's pinned comment. As of right now, though, I am still going to say pass. I understand with the injury history and the draft compensation part of this. I still think Danielle Hunter, though, he's a dog, and he's going to be an impactful player for the Vikings in this next upcoming season. And I'm also very excited to see what Brian Flores, the new defensive coordinator, has in plan for a guy like Danielle Hunter. Because we saw last year with the Vikings going to that 3-4 defense, you would see Danielle Hunter dropping back in the coverage. I really don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to be performing as a true edge. I expect Danielle Hunter to have a big year under Brian Flores. We got to talk about this. What's going on with the Zadarius Smith situation? Because if you guys remember, after the Vikings did sign Marcus Davenport, Zadarius Smith came out and said, I want to leave Minnesota. And it kind of just fizzled away. That whole report about Zadarius Smith, he put his house up for sale. He was very adamant about wanting to get out of Minnesota. So could a trade be coming for Zadarius Smith and instead of Danielle Hunter? I don't know. But if we compare the 2 players from this past season, pretty similar overall. They actually kind of had polar opposite seasons because Zadarius Smith, he jumped out to an electric start to the season, and he was great. But he really tailed off at the back half of this year's season. Danielle Hunter was the opposite. He started off slow, but he really started to ramp it up towards playoff time and towards that playoff push. So overall, though, I am going to keep, if we got to pick one, I would keep Danielle Hunter over Zadarius Smith just because Smith is a couple years older than Danielle Hunter, and I just think Danielle Hunter is just a little bit better than Zadarius Smith in my opinion. Zadarius, he was great for the Vikings last season at the beginning, but maybe it was due to injuries or maybe he's just father time is kind of tapping him on the shoulder a little bit, and maybe he doesn't have as much juice left in the tank as a guy like Danielle Hunter. But I want to ask you guys this. Who do you guys want to keep? Zadarius Smith, give me a 55. Danielle Hunter, give me a 99 in the comment section down below. If I had to pick between the two, I'm keeping 99. I'm keeping Danielle Hunter in Minnesota. I still think Danielle has that kind of top 5, top 7 edge potential like I mentioned earlier. And maybe Za'Darius Smith, he could just be cooked. So another report came out that the Vikings have actually started contract extension talks with star tight end T.J. Hockenson. This was coming from Darren Wolfson, who covers the Minnesota Vikings. And I'd love to hear this. T.J. Hockenson, he was fantastic for the Vikings last season. We really saw this offense take another step forward when we traded for T.J. Hockenson at the NFL trade deadline. 86 receptions, 914 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 10.6 yards per catch. And honestly, the 2 games that really stick out to me were both games against the Giants. He was fantastic in the regular season game, and he was fantastic in the playoff game. I actually thought they should have went to TJ more during that playoff game versus the New York Giants. But if you take a look at the highest paid tight ends in the league so far, it's a Giants tight end, Darren Waller, then it's George Kittle, and then shockingly enough, the best tight end possibly of all time is sitting at 3rd on that list, Travis Kelce, and then Goedert's at 14, and then Mark Andrews is at 14 as well. I expect T.J. Hockenson, he's only 25 years old, to kind of probably fit in that $14, $15 million per year range. That's where I would want to offer him. I wouldn't want to get him up there to the Darren Waller contract at 17. I think he's going to be probably slated in 14 and a half, maybe give him a 3-year, $45, $50 million contract extension. I'm very curious to see what that number ends up being, but I'll throw this to you guys again. How much would you offer Hockenson per year? Maybe you want to keep it low. Maybe you want to keep it around 10. Maybe you're leaning more upwards towards 17. Let me know in the comment section, because if you guys do remember, Josh Oliver, the tight end 2 for the Vikings, we just signed him to a $7 million per year deal. It's going to be interesting what the Vikings throw Hawkinson's way. Hey, NFL draft just around the corner, man, and we just came out with these sweet NFL draft hats for the Minnesota Vikings, and you can get yours now. If you go to those chatsports.com/Vikings draft, we got the flat brim. We also got the curved brim right here. I'm a big fan of this curved brim look. The draft hats in past seasons, haven't been the biggest fan of them, but these, I absolutely love them, and you know the Vikings' first round draft pick is going to be rocking one of these on draft night. So if you want one, go to chatsports.com/Vikings draft. We got to talk about the drafting a quarterback, because the Vikings have been doing a ton of work on this year's draft class. And this is a very interesting year in the NFL kind of draft. We're just talking quarterback prospects, because you got the 2 top dogs in obviously Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud. And then you got kind of the 2 wild cards, as I like to call them, Anthony Richardson and Will Levis. And then you got my little day 3 sleeper and Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I'm a big fan of him, actually. I think he's shown great tape so far on his past couple years at UCLA. He's shown steady improvement under Chip Kelly and the UCLA Bruins. I mean, just under 70% completion percentage, just over 3,100 yards, a 27-10 touchdown to interception ratio, and he's also got that dual threat ability. He's got over 640 yards this past season with 12 touchdowns. I wouldn't mind the Vikings taking a day 3 pick on him, but Anthony Richardson, this is the guy that I am very intrigued by. Obviously, he's the biggest boomer bust prospect in this year's NFL draft. If you look at the completion percentage, you're like, man, how is that guy going to go top 5 in the draft? There's no way. It's that dual threat ability. It's the physical attributes with Anthony Richardson, which excites me and excites a lot of other NFL general managers. I mean, 2,500 yards passing, 654 yards on the ground with 26 total touchdowns and 9 interceptions. I would love Vikings trade up to get a guy like that, but a guy I don't want the Vikings to get if they trade up with or trade up for will be Will Levis. Will Levis, the kind of hype around him confuses me a lot. I mean, 65.4 completion percentage, 2,400 yards, 19 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. I'm just not the biggest fan of Will Levis, and I don't really think if the Vikings are going to trade up for somebody, I don't want it to be Will Levis. If it is going to be somebody, I would love Anthony Richardson. Really, Anthony Richardson is the only QB that I would want the Vikings to trade up for. Yes, you probably aren't going to have a chance at Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud. That would just be a total blockbuster trade, but I really doubt that. But if we're talking about a day 3 guy, you know, you got the Stetson Bennett's, Max Duggins, those type of players. I would love Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I would actually take a day 3 pick on him, have him sit behind Kirk Cousins and Nick Mullins for 1 year, really get to kind of soak in and be a sponge of information with this Vikings offense, and that dual threat ability, that just excites me a ton, because this, the kind of the modern day quarterbacking in the NFL, I really do think you need to have some dual threat ability to your game. And if we've seen it with our own Kirk Cousins, that's where his shortcomings have came. Not being able to make plays outside the pocket, not being able to play that typical backyard football type of mentality. So that's my take. If the Vikings are going to get a quarterback, the only one I trade up for would probably be Anthony Richardson. Day 3 pick, give me Dorian Thompson-Robinson. As always, follow me on Twitter at Pat Seatman NFL. We're talking about the Vikes all season long. We'll see you guys next time. Skol Vikes.